Hello everyone, it's Monday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Ahead of the 70th anniversary of the armistice agreement from the Korean War, which North Korea calls Victory Day, the regime had been ramping up its thorny rhetoric and launching missiles. With tensions on the peninsula escalating, Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo are reportedly going to have a trilateral summit next month at Camp David. Now, what are main topics that are going to be discussed and what significance does this summit have? To talk about this, we invite Professor Lim Eun-jung from Kongju National University. Professor Im, welcome.
Hello.
Hello. And we also have Bruce Klingner, a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Mr. Klingner, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
All right. Now, first question to our Professor Im. Now, a trilateral summit between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo is going to take place in August. And this marks the first time three countries' leaders will meet other than on the sidelines of the separate summit. Well, what significance does this standalone summit have?
Well, as you just mentioned, this is ever first time for the three countries' leader to have a separate summit meeting, because they have usually had trilateral summit meetings during the other multilateral meetings like G7 and anything else. However, this time, again, the three leaders decided to meet in the Camp Davis in the Midland, which is 1 hour drive from Washington, D.C. And, you know, it indicates that the three countries' leaders agreed on the importance of the trilateral cooperation, which was pretty much expected. Because if we recall our memory, during the G7 Hiroshima meetings, again, the President Biden invited the two other leaders, President Yoon and the Prime Minister Kishida, because back then, even though we expected a longer, more, substantial meeting, however, back then in May in Hiroshima, President Zelensky of Ukraine made his visit, and every agenda or every scheduled meeting was cannot but again to be rescheduled or adjusted. So back then again, the President Biden invited the two leaders. Or last November in the Phnom Penh, Cambodia, the three leaders had a meeting and they agreed on a declaration which was about much more comprehensive cooperation among the three countries. Again, the trilateral cooperation among the three makes more sense than before, having had the more intensified threat from the nuclear-armed North, or U.S.-China strategic rivalry is getting intensified as well, which can cause some, potentially can cause some economic security-related risk in the future. So having had all this kind of more like a complex, risky situations, again, the three leaders, I think, agreed on the importance of the trilateral cooperation.
Right, I see. So this summit is going to be more significant in that it could be much more longer and it could be focused on three-way cooperation. Now, Mr. Klingner, the meeting is going to be held at Camp David, rural U.S. presidential retreat. And a lot of experts say this is very significant. In what ways do you believe so?
Well, Camp David is a presidential vacation retreat. He often goes there for the weekend because it is only about an hour drive or a shorter flight from the White House. And the most famous meetings that took place at Camp David were in 1978 between the U.S., Israel, and Egypt, and that led to what was called the Camp David Accords, which is a very significant breakthrough in improving relations between Israel and Egypt. And other than that, there have been several or numerous meetings amongst leaders, and they're either seen as it provides an isolated retreat where difficult negotiations can occur, or in the case of the South Korea, Japan, U.S. meeting, it's going to be much friendlier, much more informal, and more important than the location will be the discussions, which are a reflection not only of the increasing Chinese and North Korean threat, but also the growing policy alignment amongst Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo. And there has been a lot of progress in obviously in improving relations between Seoul and Tokyo, and that has led to a much greater security cooperation bilaterally and trilaterally.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Lim, let's talk about the agenda that's going to be on the table. Now, first and foremost will be a discussion on strengthening deterrence against North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. In what way will three-way cooperation be enhanced in this area?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely, as you just mentioned, North Korea's nuclear program should be and will be, I think, discussed as the top priority among the three leaders. This is really main fundamental purpose of the trilateral cooperation, I think. Because if you think about, geographic location, again, South Korea, we borders north, which means we have our shorter distance from them. And we do have a more like a human intelligence capability, which is called like a human. Whereas Japan is little distant from the peninsula. Because of that, again, they can see the where the missile drops, which means, again, we do have more like a kind of complementary information between, again, the South Korea and the Japan. Of course, U.S. is back there. So having had this, complementarity among the three countries, I think, again, we can strengthen our intelligence capability and at the same time our deterrence capability as well. So that should be definitely number one agenda. But not only just that, again, we have many other emerging security issues. Again, this year, during the Arirang news, the news time, again, the reporters have reported about all this, disastrous situations in South Korea. And heavy monsoon rains really hit the country. And every year, those natural disaster is getting more and more serious. So we definitely need to seriously deal with the challenge by the climate change. Japan definitely. And Japan, they do have more natural disaster than the peninsula, which means they have more actually know-hows or even more technology about how to deal with the natural disaster. So climate change or how to deal with the natural disaster, this can be another agenda, or like energy security issues or cyber security too. Because, North Korea, they not only just, they are threatening us not only with the nuclear arms or nuclear weapons, they also stealing money from the cryptocurrency system, and they use those money to develop their weapons. So cybersecurity is now literally a real threat, not only to South Korea, to Japan, or to US, or to the rest of the world. So again, cybersecurity can be another agenda, economic security or human rights issue. There can be many other important agenda for the three countries to talk together.
Right, I see. So the talk could definitely include a variety of issues, including cybersecurity and so on. Now, Mr. Klingner, before we move on to economic security cooperation, recently the inaugural meeting of the Nuclear Consultative Group took place in Seoul. And though NSC, the official Kurt Campbell already pointed out that the primary focus is on intensive bilateral engagement between Seoul and Washington, do you see any possibility of discussion taking place regarding this NCG developing into a trilateral framework to include Japan?
I think it's very likely whether the NCG itself grows to three countries or whether there's a separate trilateral group is immaterial. But we certainly have to have greater trilateral cooperation on security issues, not only against the North Korean threat, but the Chinese threat. And Japan is far less concerned about the U.S. extended deterrent guarantee than Seoul has been in recent months. But it certainly makes sense to have greater cooperation, whichever group it is. And because any kind of conflict on the Korean Peninsula would involve not only the United States and Korea, but certainly Japan. There's the 7 UN command rear bases in Japan, which the U.S. as well as UN sending states would need to defeat any kind of North Korean conflict. So it certainly makes sense, but it may not be in the near term. But there is a separate U.S.-Japan nuclear consultative group with a different name. But certainly, I think we'll see trilateral or even quadrilateral, including Australia, sometime in the future.
I see your point. Now, Professor Lim, let's move on to the economic security cooperation that is also going to be on the agenda. Now, how might the three countries, enhance supply chain ties amid China's ongoing export controls on rare materials?
Well, of course, Korea, Japan, US, all these countries are highly industrialized society and economy. These countries definitely have to move forward toward the fourth industrial revolution and low carbon society. Again, how to decarbonize our economic system and how to achieve all this digital transformation toward the fourth industrial revolution. These two are, again, the demands of the time. So definitely, of course, not only just these three countries, any country should be probably and is willing to move forward to that direction. However, when we are trying to achieve that goal, again, the fourth industrial revolution and low carbon society, we need a new technology or green technology. However, these green technologies also need some material, raw material. And Korea, Japan, these two countries are unfortunately very natural resource poor countries. So when we are trying to expand, for example, renewable energy, we need to, of course, produce solar panel. But when you're trying to produce a solar panel, we need to import another like raw material, critical minerals from China-like resource-richer countries. So these things is again the complicating supply network. However, now what basically Korea or Japan-like country are trying to do is, we want to reduce dependency on some specific country, like, again, the China. This is not against, I don't think this is against China. Rather, we are trying to balance out. So definitely, U.S.'s strategy these days is nearshoring or reshoring, ally-shoring, friend-shoring. These kind of strategies are, again, conducted by the U.S. and Korea and Japan-like countries are also trying to be with that kind of strategy because we need to definitely balance. Otherwise, our risk management cannot be that much sustainable. So economic security issue, definitely important, critical issue for the country like Korea, Japan, resource poor country. And I think through this trilateral meeting, the three countries can to work and can discuss further on how to balance or how to reduce dependency on some specific source or some specific country. Again, this is, I think, a pretty much necessary step for all the three countries too.
I see. I can definitely see the reason why South Korea and, of course, Japan needs a strategy to secure those raw materials. Now, Mr. Klingner, discussion on ongoing global issues, including the war in Ukraine, of course, will take place. And given that President Yoon Suk-yeol visited Kyiv recently, what further developments could we expect?
Well, I think there'll be discussions on what additional security support that South Korea can provide. I believe that South Korea should provide direct lethal aid to Ukraine. Seoul has avoided that so far. They've provided a lot of weapons and ammunition to Poland, which may or may not be going into Ukraine. While Seoul claims that it has not been providing the military aid, we don't know if artillery shells and others may have gone into Ukraine. But I think, to uphold the principles that President Yoon has said in numerous speeches, and as well as the national security strategy of South Korea, it would be, fulfilling those high, lofty aspirations for South Korea to stand up to the Russian invasion, the aggression by Moscow against Ukraine, and provide military aid directly to Ukraine. It's very much needed right now. Other nations have been providing direct lethal aid, and I think it is in the interest not only of Ukraine, but also to uphold South Korea's principles to do the same.
Right. Right. I believe we should just wait and see what kind of decisions South Korea could more make for Ukraine. Now, Professor Lim, so some watchers have raised the possibility of creating a regular summit form similar to that of Quad, holding annual summits in each country. What are the chances of such a forum coming into existence? And if it does, what would that mean?
Well, we'll see. I think the possibility is pretty likely, comparatively speaking, compared to before. Again, it definitely became much more likely than before. However, still in this country or in Japan as well, there are critical voices or even concerns as well. Still, the level of trust between the two countries' people, I can't say is high enough to back up fully, again, the national leaders, again, willingness or political will to move forward. So probably we need to be a little much more careful about those, critical domestic, those critical opinion as well. However, as long as, again, we do face this serious security threats from the north, and as long as we do have many other agenda, as I already highlighted, again, the chances for the trilateral cooperation is higher than any time in the past. So having said that, regularize this kind of, again, the trilateral cooperation or more like institutionalize this trilateral meeting might be, again, the necessary, and I think more people can accept this. However, again, at the same time, I will say, again, we need to be a little bit cautious, and it might take a little longer than probably we want to.
Right, I see. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, Mr. Klingner, moving on to the reaction and response from other countries, North Korea issued a statement saying the U.S. deployment of strategic assets such as SSBN could fall under the conditions of North Korea using nuclear weapons. And after saying that, it fired several cruise missiles into Yellow Sea on Saturday. Now, what does North Korea's recent move suggest, in your opinion?
Well, they're trying to intimidate Washington and its allies from increasing security cooperation. They're also trying to get Washington to reverse the recent trend of providing additional reassurance on the extended deterrence guarantee, which has been the resumption of military exercises as well as the resumption of rotational deployment of strategic assets or nuclear-capable assets on or near the Korean Peninsula. So North Korea prefers when we degrade our deterrence and defense capabilities, as we did for 4 years when we canceled those military exercises and rotational deployments. So they're threatening with the nuclear threat was that saying that just the deployment of a U.S. nuclear-capable submarine to a South Korean port was enough to justify a North Korean preemptive nuclear attack. Obviously, they wouldn't do so over that pretense. But it's all a way of trying to get the U.S. and its allies to back down.
Right. Mr. Klingner, one more question. Now, as the 70th anniversary of the signing of the Korean War armistice, known in North Korea as Victory Day, as I have already mentioned, approaches, it is widely expected that a large-scale military parade will take place. Now, what kind of weaponry do you expect to see during the parade, and what more provocations should we expect around that time?
Well, from satellite imagery, we've seen very extensive parade preparations, so it's likely to be another large parade, as has occurred several times in recent years. We're expecting display of military weapons. We never know ahead of time, really, whether there'll be a new missile displayed or not. And whether North Korea does a missile launch or a 7th nuclear test has been long expected during the parade or not. It's just really a matter of timing. But what we've seen in recent years is an uptick in the number of launches that North Korea has done of its missiles. And it's all a way of trying to intimidate the U.S. and its allies. So things that would be even more provocative than what they've done in recent years would be an ICBM launch over Japan out to a large distance into the Pacific, perhaps displaying that it has reentry vehicle capabilities. It could also do the 7th nuclear test, which has been predicted by Washington and Seoul for over a year now. or sort of a barrage of missiles that would go over Japan, perhaps several intermediate range missiles. So, but oftentimes North Korea has just had the parade and using the display of current or former missiles as a way of trying to intimidate us.
Right, so though we'll have to wait and see, it's very likely that it is going to be very extensive. Now, Professor Lim, so this summit is also in a way intending to declare strong solidarity against China and Russia. So could you tell us more about the message this summit is trying to send to these countries? Could you be a little bit brief about this?
Well, first of all, I don't think, the trilateral cooperation, the purpose of this is not against China and Russia. Of course, now U.S.-China strategic rivalry is getting intensified. Russia caused the war. They deserve whatever those criticism from the rest of the world. However, as long as China and Russia are there within the region, again, they cannot be simply our enemy. They are in some ways, they are a partner as well. So I hope, and I think that the meeting going to be much more constructive about, the future direction. And I hope, again, the three national leaders can discuss about, the better future possibility for the regional cooperation.
Right, I see your point. All right, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Lim and Mr. Klingner, for your insights and your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.